welcome to my sewing room. I have a very special guest today, June Millinger, and she has brought some wonderful things showing how machine embroidery and sewing can all go together with quilts, heirlooms, women's clothing, children's clothing. So let's just have some fun seeing how versatile our sewing can be in today's wonderful world. This is a wonderful quilt combining some traditional patchwork with machine embroidery. And one of the most fun things about this quilt is with the use of metallic threads for the quilting. It just makes it ever so interesting. June told me that she literally took this off her bathroom wall. It's a towel rack. And then here she's put the cuff of one of her grandmother's dresses, and then she's done absolutely every bit of this cloth with beautiful machine embroidery. You see her initials are stitched out in hearts, and there's wonderful up and down, almost an Indian looking stitch, up and down, beautiful zigzagging on the bottom, all done by machine, of course. Now, for those of you that love quilting, you need something wonderful to carry your quilting supplies in. As a matter of fact, this looks like a great bag for any kind of sewing to me. It has traditional quilting with machine embroidery on the front and more on the back. This is a very, very elegant blouse and a way of combining machine cut work with a very traditional linen, a very tailored linen. And you know what else I love about this? 3 different colors used in the machine embroidery. Normally you think of cut work as just ecru on ecru or white on white, but this is a very creative cut work shell done on an elegant linen. So much fun. This is a Rise and Shine, a beautiful kitchen den piece with traditional patchwork, and it's just so wonderful. It has all kinds of different chickens and says cock-a-doodle-doo and good morning. Machine embroidery, rise and shine, y'all, at the top. Now that sounds like a good Alabama expression, doesn't it? And then down here we have some more beautiful chickens and more machine embroidery, absolutely beautifully done. What a nice addition to a kitchen or a breakfast room. Once again, an elegant heirloom piece with a beautiful basket. By the way, this basket, this machine embroidery, these were called wedding baskets, and it was a very common motif in the Victorian times, and this one, of course, was done with machine embroidery, making it very easy. I have another elegant, beautiful shell that June has done that has, it almost has an Arizona feel to it. It has wonderful, very tailored, very clean lines with a little gold bead sewn at the bottom. Isn't that a wonderful tailored blouse? And you know, I love to make lace or I love to buy lace, either way you want to. This particular lace motif on this beautiful placemat was made all by machine, and it really is easy enough to make lace by machine if you're so fortunate as to have one of the wonderful embroidery machines. Now won't you come on over to the technique boards with me and let's see how to make some of these wonderful things. As you maybe can see, the suit I have on and the suit hanging on the board are made from the same pattern, but they're really very, very different. My suit has buttons and silk ribbon embroidery down the front. This gorgeous suit, done out of pink linen, has actually 2 strips. The plackets have wonderful decorative, very tailored and very beautiful decorative work down the front. The pockets have the same beautiful machine embroidery embellishment. The sleeves have more of the wonderful tone-on-tone embellishment. And I do have a secret for you. Let me turn this around so you can see the back of this fabulous jacket. It has more decorative machine embroidery done tone-on-tone, which I think is really elegant. Now, more decorative work on this very tailored blouse and skirt. The blouse has beautiful machine work around the neckline. And you know, entredot is really hem stitching. And here, the hem has actually been stitched in with the beautiful wing needle machine hem stitching. Once again, that same technique of the wing needle hem stitching to actually put in a hem has been used around the bottom of this beautiful blouse. Now let me show you another really neat way of putting in a hem, which has been done on this particular skirt. The hem has been turned up, and the skirt hem has been put in with the wonderful up and down decorative stitching that was used in a larger format on the jacket, making this a very tailored and a beautiful suit with lots of elegant machine embroidery. I have as my guest today my friend and business colleague, June Millinger. June is Director of Education for Brother International. June, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to see you again.
Well, I'm glad to see you again too, my friend. Show us some wonderful things.
Well, you were showing over at the board earlier about that placket on my jacket, and I really wondered how to do that. And so I decided that I would select a design that we would find in one of the memory cards. And once you've selected your design, and you can see that it would take 4 minutes to embroider this, then I would take my placket and I pressed it back so that I could find out where my design needed to be so that I could easily center it as I was going to embroider. And with those reference points, I can begin my process. Here, I've already started this, and I'll just show you before we actually make the machine do some work for us here. I've already started the process, and I've completed the first section, and the second section is about to start happening.
June, how difficult is it to line up this wonderful work where you have it just the whole row of it?
It's really not that hard at all because the machines are programmed to be very exact, and actually on some of the machines you'll find that they've got the information on the screen for you so that you know exactly where your placement should be. It will tell you. In fact, I even wrote a little note here, and I know that this was at 0.10 horizontally and 0.90 vertically. So I actually have a precise reference point. And we even give you little templates so that you could actually use your template for reference as you're going to embroider. And once you have you've embroidered the first section, all that you have to do in this case was I just ripped it away from the first piece of stabilizer, and I folded here. And it's not a real exact science, but it doesn't have to be. Just this fold and this little notch here on my embroidery hoop give me a reference point that's good enough so that I can easily connect as I go along. And when I'm all done, I can actually have a completed grouping of these stitches, which were started out to
perfectly
be
matched.
4 at a time, but they're all perfectly matched. And let's say I told you that was 4 minutes, so 4 times 3 or 4 sections in less than 20 minutes, the process is completed. I really, find it to be quite intriguing. We all would like to have beautiful things, just like all the designers make for us, but we really don't have quite enough time. So when we're done embroidering, all we have to do is take the placket and add it to the front of our blouse here that we created already and have cut out actually, and then just seam it up the front. And when we're all finished, and we have that beautiful look that we had on the front of the jacket. And even on today's machines, you can mirror image the designs so that you don't have to worry about whether or not it matches, and it's really a lot of fun.
Oh,
and we all look different, just like your jacket looks completely different than mine.
Same patterns, just completely different.
Right.
But the fun of it, I think more and more people are sewing for stress relief and fun than anything else, don't you?
Definitely.
And also to have something that really is in the very expensive departments, because the machine embroidery is really on the high pricey clothes, to have something that didn't take too long to do, and we had the fun of creating our very own.
Exactly, exactly.
All right, thank you so much,
You're welcome.
June. And now June has another garment construction tip for you. June, what do you have to share with our viewers next?
Well, I thought I would show you something that was really neat that's found in this machine, and it's built into the machine. So all I have to do is just select my stitch, and the machine can actually sew left and right. Now, if I had just a regular sewing machine at home, I could mark my fabric as well and follow the diamond stitching and complete the diamond stitch that way. But when I'm done sewing this, it actually tracks back and forth perfectly. When I'm done sewing this, I'm ready to make I can turn these inside out, and I'm going to show you that here on the boards. You can see how it's been completed, and it's precisely formed over and over. Then I wanted to make a special edging for the pocket that was a little different than machine embroidery. So this is the wrong side, so I cut this away, and you can see.
It's like little teeth.
Make sure, those teeth, and make sure that I cut into the corners. Then when I'm done, I can use a point turner, and I can actually turn the points and stick the point turner in there, and I will have the little shark's tooth effect here. As I move along here, you can see that trimming in the corners made a big difference, and I pressed this down. And then I selected an applique stitch that's built into the machine. And most machines have a stitch like this. And if you don't have that, you could do it by hand, or you could even use a small zigzag stitch. And when the technique is completed, I would have a very textured look for the pocket. And you can just do it with a contrasting thread or with a tone-on-tone look. And it makes my pocket look a little bit different, and certainly not like anything I would see in the stores.
Well, that's one of the reasons I think women are sewing clothes for themselves. In addition to just having fun and relaxing. I know I've had mothers of all ages, ladies come in and say, Martha, I've had such a hectic day. Back when I used to sell sewing machines, I've had such a hectic day, I've got to have something to go home and sew tonight, or I'll just never be able to go to sleep.
That's right.
So it is something different, and it is fun, and of course you and I think it's the most wonderful hobby of all, don't we?
It sure is. It sure
June,
is.
thank you so very much for being here. We always love to see you and your wonderful ideas.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And next I have a home decorating project for you. I have a wonderful and very, very easy project for you. This is a little hand towel, and actually you can see the rows of, this is a row of the faggoting and the wing needle entredeaux and then the hem stitching to hold the hem. However, this one is purchased, but if you are so fortunate as to have a sewing machine that does wing needlework, you can stitch it, just take a piece of linen as this towel is, and stitch all of these stitches in. Now the little embellishment that is so much fun to do and really pretty, and if you have wedding gifts to make or shower presents or any kind of a gift, what you might want to do is to put the little buttons and tie them on with little silk ribbons. Now another wonderful thing to do, of course, would be to put a monogram or just a machine embroidery up here. But this is so very easy to do, and let me give you a couple more ideas. First of all, these are buttons that don't even match. They're pearl buttons, and the reason we got them kind of not very even in pink, we dropped them in a fabric dye or in a RIT dye, either one you want to, and just leave the pearl buttons in there for a while, and they will absorb some of the color. So you can actually take your button box with your mismatched buttons and get your little buttons ready. Then here's all you do. You have I use a tapestry needle. I have my button and I have this little organza ribbon. I weave it through the holes, whether I've done them with a wing needle in my sewing machine or whether I purchase a little towel. And I will just weave it through to attach the button, tie a little knot here, and tie a little bow. And you can use any leftover ribbons you have. As I said, ribbons from your buttons from your button. I didn't mean ribbons, I mean leftover buttons. As you can see, we've dyed all kinds of different buttons here, and I can put them all over the bottom with the little ribbons, and I really think it would be very, very nice to also do a little machine or even a hand embroidery for an easy, inexpensive, and fun gift to give. And next we have some hand embroidery for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Kathy Neal. Kathy is one of the finest needle artists in the world today. She is one of our regular teachers at the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion in Huntsville. Kathy is enrolled as a student in the certificated course at the Royal School of London. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. Another fun day in the sewing room together. Today I have a number of things that I'd like to share with our viewers. First of all, we have been having a good time with our Elizabethan embroidery, our silk and metal thread on linen. And today we've talked a lot about our silk threads, and today I wanted to mention just a little bit about the metal threads. they're called metal threads, although today the threads available, most are not actually, most don't have any metal content, but actually in the Middle Ages and in the Tudor and Elizabethan periods, the threads were actually made from sheets of gold and silver and other precious metals that were pounded just paper thin, cut into small strips and wound around a silk cord core. So that is how they got the name, actually, metal threads. Today, they really don't have any relationship with metal, except that they have a metallic luster to them. So I brought a few of my metal threads with me today. Some of the threads that I used on the blouse here are actually what we call passing gold or passing silver, and they're the ones here on the spool, and they would actually be put into a needle and they would actually pass through the fabric. Now, with gold work and other metal thread work, much of the actual technique is not stitches that actually pass through the surface of the fabric. They are couched or laid, and then, as with this silver thread, you would use just one piece of that or two pieces of that, and then take this very fine couching, silk couching thread that's almost invisible. You can barely see it, and you would actually couch down these threads with the couching thread. And of course, you also have the gold tone couching thread. But that's a little bit, there's a world of interesting metallics out there for hand sewing. And I encourage you to explore the possibility of possibly using some metal thread in your work. The metal threads were very precious, and therefore, except for ecclesiastical work and the work of the nobility, the metal threads were used very sparingly, as I've done here in this Elizabethan, only just for a little touch of sparkle here and there. I'd like to talk to you today about satin stitching. Quite often the satin dot is a wonderful element to include in your embroidery, and I'd like to talk to you about the steps that you go to in doing perfect satin dots. Have you ever tried to make satin dots and they end up looking like footballs or little rectangular objects? I'd like to talk to you about the different steps that can create an actual nicely rounded padded dot. As you see, I've already worked part of the satin dot here. I have done a split stitch around the circumference of the design line here. After I do that, then I start my padding. The first thing I do is I do what I call wagon wheels across the inside. And after I've done that, that builds up the very center, because there are more threads, Martha, right across here at the center point than anywhere else. And finally, I begin my straight padding, and I decide which way the final satin stitch will go. And I want my inside padding to go at a 90-degree angle, in other words, perpendicular to the final satin stitching. So you see here, I've started I left this open so you could see the wagon wheel stitching, and then I have some satin stitches. All of this inside the perimeter of the original outlining split stitch. And finally, we get to the fun part, and that is the satin stitching. And for the satin stitching, there are a couple of pointers that I would like to give you here, and that is that, especially if you are using our 2 strands of silk like we are before, I want to show you a little trick. First of all, you want to come up just outside the split stitch line, and you want to come out at an angle, just like that. And when you go in over here on this side, you want it to angle in. And I always say this is like airplanes taking off and landing for my students to remember. But finally, I want to say, in satin stitching, one of the most important things is knowing when enough is enough. So many people make their circles look like footballs because they take one stitch too many. Now, I also want to show you one other thing as I'm doing this. With 2 strands of thread, I like, in order to get it nice and straight, I separate the threads, just like that, so that when I go in, I go in between them, go into my circle, and when I pull it through, the threads lie very nice and flat, just like that. And when I say enough is enough, you don't want to keep stitching except just until you finally have the last little bit of split stitch covered up. And you have to, and that is not all the way to the end. That's what makes them look oval. So we probably take just one more stitch here, and by doing that, we have a nice circular form. I also wanted to say that one nice thing about this metal thread, there you have a nice circular effect without it coming to a point at the ends. I've also gone around the edge. Sometimes when I do these stitches, I go around the edge with my metal thread. Not only will it hide any unruly edges that you may have in your satin stitches, but it also gives a little sparkle and a little luster, a little dewdrop to that last part. And one final note that I would like to make to you is, as I was looking at the peas, I was reminded that this, the tendril on the pea pod, you can always taper a line in your design by changing stitches. And if you'll notice, I started with the chain stitch, switched to the outline stitch, then to the split stitch, then to the back stitch, and finally cut out one thread and back stitch with only one strand of the silk so that it tapered from large to small at the end. Lots of little tips in this work.
Oh, Kathy, how fascinating. And I just love to hear your history as well as see your stitches.
It is fun.
Thank you so very much for sharing your knowledge. And now won't you come to my attic with me? I want you to see this beautiful little girl's dress. And one of the things I want to point out is how difficult it is to find little girls' dresses. I don't know if they just wore them out and passed them down through the family so much. You can find baby things and women's things, but this is a real find. It has wonderful pin tucks and laces. And I wanted especially to show you the lace that has actually been inserted into the armhole curve. That is a beautiful thing to do, but actually not a very safe thing to do because the stress on the armhole is a little bit difficult, but this dress is in perfect condition. Look at the beautiful tucks in between the laces, which have been pointed on the sleeves. It's a little dropped waist dress, so therefore somewhere around 1900 up to about 1925. More tucks and beautiful lace shaping in the front. And once again, the dress is just as beautiful in the back. I always love to show you the backs. It's just as pretty in the back as it is in the front. Now, this is meant to have ribbon run through it, and you can see it's a beautiful Swiss trim called beading, when you actually have the two little holes. And you know, in France, they call it ribbon slot, but we tend to call it beading here. For my Sewing from the Heart today, I have a letter that came email, and I don't have the lady's name, but it's a really sweet letter, so I'll just read it to you. Dear Martha, I belong to Capital Baptist Church in Salem, Oregon. Last year, 4 of us went to Charleston, South Carolina, and worked on a mission fest. I sewed clothing and taught sewing to the underprivileged women in a low-income area. When I came home, wanting to keep the momentum going, I went to our Women on Mission meeting and volunteered to sew for a local homeless mission. I have sewn nightshirts for the gentlemen who sleep there at night and bags for toiletries to be put into and given out to those same men. I know that this is not much, but there's so many places that need things sewn and mended that I plan to carry this ministry on in nursing homes and wherever I can find places who need this service as a ministry of our church. And I will tell you that you say that it's not very much, but I'll tell you what, I think that your ministry is a very large ministry, and I'm so happy that you have taken the time there in Salem, Oregon to reach out and do some sewing for those less fortunate. We are so blessed to have a sewing machine. In many countries of the world, they could support a family if they just had any old kind of sewing machine. And you are so blessed that you have decided to do this ministry, and I just feel like that it's a great ministry. Thank you so much for coming to join me on my sewing room today, and I would really like to invite you back next time.